Thanks for joining me on the Shady Grey Matter podcast. Today we're listening to The House That Watches, an eerie original story written and produced by Jeremy at Shady Grey Matter. If you enjoy this tale, be sure to follow the show and leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. Or if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, Chapter 1, The Unclaimed.
The corn stood still, unnaturally still, as if it had been told to freeze. Mara rolled up the window, killing the shrill cicada chorus that had grown louder the farther she drove from the main road. Her rental car idles at the bottom of the hill, gravel crackling faintly beneath the tires, heat haze rippling up from the hood. She could see the house from here. 3 stories of dry, flaking clapboard, its western turret half-sunken from time and storm rot. The roof sagged like it was sighing. She left the engine running a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned the key. Silence pressed in. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of the engine ticking as it cooled. Grabbing her bag from the passenger seat, she stepped out into the heat. The sky was blue without being bright, the kind of Iowa blue that felt oddly washed out, as though it had been painted on with leftover watercolors. The cornfields on either side of the gravel path were pale golden green, but the ears looked small, undergrown. She walked toward the house. The gravel path narrowed into overgrown grass as it neared the porch. No tire tracks. No footprints in the dirt. But the front door was cracked slightly open. Mara stopped at the base of the porch steps. Her memory failed her. She'd been here before, she was certain, had stood on this porch as a child, maybe held someone's hand. But the image wouldn't coalesce. Only fragments came. The smell of lemon polish, a lace curtain, a cat that hissed at her from a stairwell and was never seen again. And her mother's voice, flat and cold. "Don't touch anything that doesn't belong to you." She climbed the steps. The boards creaked under her weight, dry and high-pitched, like bone under pressure. Up close, the door wasn't just ajar. It looked inviting. As if it had expected her. It had opened itself to greet her. That absurd thought came with a sudden pressure in her chest. She knocked once sharply. "Cal," she called. No answer. She knocked again louder. "Calvin, if you're in there and you're high, I swear to God." Nothing. Mara exhaled slowly through her nose, adjusted the strap of her bag, and pushed the door open with 2 fingers. It groaned, but not too loudly. A modest, almost polite sound, like it didn't want to scare her off. The air inside was warm and still, carrying the dense, sour scent of old paper and linoleum glue. A faint hum vibrated somewhere in the walls. Perhaps the refrigerator, perhaps something older. The entry hall opened into a wide sitting room on the left, with a dusty settee beneath a spider-webbed window. On the right, a narrow staircase ascended into shadow. Portraits lined the walls. No faces she recognized. She stepped inside, and the door whispered shut behind her. Not a slam. Just closed. Quietly. "Cal," she said again, more gently now. Still no answer. The hardwood beneath her feet felt soft at the edges, warped from moisture and time. Her boots made little thuds as she crossed the hall, her bag brushing the wooden rail. Everything looked drained, colorless, faded from decades of unfiltered sun and disuse. She reached the center of the entryway and paused. The air felt denser here, like standing in a room that had just been cried in. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the room for signs of life. Cigarette smoke, half-eaten food, open windows. Nothing, just the light filtering through cracked shutters, and the dry whisper of something shifting upstairs. Just once. Then footsteps. Behind her. Soft, barefoot, deliberate. She spun around, and there he was. Cal stood at the far end of the hall, shirtless, hair a little longer than she remembered, a smudge of something on his cheek. His arms hung loose at his sides. His eyes looked unfocused, then narrowed slightly. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse. "I figured you wouldn't." Mara opened her mouth to reply, but what she meant to say slipped away, forgotten like a dream. The silence returned, and behind Cal the staircase creaked, as if someone else had just climbed 1 step higher. "You're barefoot," Mara said flatly. Cal looked down at his feet as if surprised by them. "Huh. Yeah. And sunburned." He rubbed the back of his neck absently. Yeah, I lost track of time out back. There's a rusted-out swing. You remember that swing? No, she said, stepping further in. And I doubt it's weight-tested for grown men. He grinned crookedly. Still a librarian, huh? She ignored that. How long have you been here? Cal shrugged. Couple days. Maybe 3. Hard to tell. The clocks don't work and I don't have my phone. You don't have it, or the house ate it? He pointed upward, toward the second floor. I think it's up there somewhere. Mara scanned him again. Pupils normal, no visible tremor, no smell of liquor. She hated that she still knew what signs to check for. Are you sleeping? Cal turned and walked into the parlor without answering. Mara hesitated, then followed. The room was dim, but lived in. Someone had cleared the dust from one side of the couch and left a pile of neatly folded shirts on the armrest. A single plate sat on the floor near the fireplace, crusted with the remnants of peanut butter and something red. Raspberry jam, maybe. Or ketchup. Or blood. Mara didn't lean in close enough to tell. You moved in? She asked dryly. Squatter's rights, Cal said, plopping down onto the couch. It groaned. Figured one of us had to make sure the house didn't collapse before you came to gut it. I'm not gutting anything, Mara replied. I'm just here to sign whatever papers the lawyer needs. Then we list it, someone bulldozes it, and we split whatever pennies it's worth. Cal's mouth twitched. So you're not staying? Not for long. Just like Mom, he said too casually. Mara tensed, jaw tight. Don't. He glanced at her, eyes suddenly sharp, as if trying to memorize the line she'd just drawn so he could tow it later. She changed the subject. You said you've been here 3 days? Yeah. There's no electricity. Yep. No running water. He lifted a half-empty gallon jug from beneath the couch. I've been pacing myself. Mara pinched the bridge of her nose. Jesus, Cal. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked around the room. At the peeling wallpaper, the mildewed curtains, the empty fireplace. Then quietly. It's not so bad. I think it remembers us. What? The house. Mara looked at him as though he'd spoken in tongues. You've gone soft in the head. Maybe, he admitted, scratching his forearm absently. But I swear, Mar, when I came in the first time, the air smelled like Mom's coat. You remember that smell? That sharp perfume and cigarettes and that, what was it, wintergreen gum? She stared at him. Her face didn't move, but something flickered in her eyes. I don't remember, she said. Cal nodded, slow and solemn. You do. You just don't want to. Before she could answer, and she wasn't sure what she would have said, something creaked overhead again. A long, slow groan in the floorboards above. Cal didn't react. You hear that? She asked. He looked at the ceiling, then back to her. I told you. The house remembers. Mara walked to the window and opened one of the wooden slats. The air outside was hotter than inside. Her rental car sat at the bottom of the hill, looking tiny and unnecessary. I'm staying one night, she said finally. That's all. Cal raised an eyebrow. Is that what the house told you? She turned. No. That's what I told it. Mara drifted into the dining room, letting her fingers brush along the edge of a dry oak sideboard. Her boots left faint prints in the film of dust coating the floor. It was strange. The room looked abandoned, but nothing had been taken. The chairs still stood around the long, narrow table like they were waiting for a Sunday meal that never came. Cal trailed behind her, humming low and tuneless. It made her shoulders twitch. Did you clean anything? I swept, he said. But then I stopped. It kept undoing itself. What? He pointed toward the far end of the room, where a grandfather clock stood wedged in a corner. Swear to God, he said. I cleared that spot 3 times. Dust keeps coming back. Mara approached the clock. Its pendulum hung motionless. The time read 5:47, but the second hand was stuck in a trembling twitch, just before the 12. She tapped the glass. The hand didn't budge. You think this means something? She asked. Cal shrugged. Everything does if you stay here long enough. They moved into the kitchen next, a narrow linoleum-floored stretch of outdated cabinets and a yellowed fridge humming faintly. On the far wall, a row of clocks hung side by side, mismatched and dusty. Each one was stopped on a different time. 12:12, 9:46, 2:03, none of them ticking. You do this, she asked. Nope, Cal said. I found them like that. Mara took a step back and scanned the room. One of the clocks, a ceramic one shaped like a goose, had a faint smear of red on the minute hand. Dried old. She didn't ask. Loretta really lived like this? Mara said. All alone. Cal wandered toward the sink, turned the faucet. A dry knocking sound. Nothing came out. If you can call this living. He bent down and opened a cabinet beneath the sink, revealing a tangle of old cleaning supplies and rusted-out steel wool pads. But nestled between them was a bundle of paper wrapped in faded twine. What's that? He pulled it out slowly, holding it like it might crumble. Mail. Mara took the bundle from him and untied the twine. Most were old electric bills and advertisements. But near the middle was a thick cream envelope, its flap unsealed. She turned it over. Her name. And Cal's. In cursive she didn't recognize. Did you read this? She asked. No. Saw it yesterday but figured. Well, you'd throw a fit if I opened your mail. She slid a nail under the flap and opened it. Inside, a single piece of stationery paper, blue-lined, folded neatly. Dear Mara and Calvin, if you're reading this, then you've come back. That's good. That means it worked. You're both needed. The house will explain the rest. Trust your memories, even the wrong ones. Especially the wrong ones. L. Mara read it twice. The handwriting was neat, clean, unfamiliar. She flipped the envelope again. The postmark was smeared, but the stamp was dated 2013. 12 years ago, she muttered. I never got this. I did, Cal said softly. I think I did. Maybe. I remember something. A letter. A hallway. He looked dizzy. Mara tucked the note into her jacket pocket without comment. We'll give it to the lawyer tomorrow. You still think you're leaving tomorrow? She walked out of the kitchen without answering. Behind her, the second hand on one of the clocks shivered, then stopped. The air outside hit her like breath from an oven, thick, still, and buzzing faintly with a static she couldn't place. Mara descended the front steps with the phone already raised to her ear. She'd left 2 voicemails for the lawyer earlier that morning. Now she was trying again, if only for the illusion of control. Anything to hold on to that felt real. The signal bars flickered, then vanished, then returned 1, 2, only to drop again. She muttered a curse and turned in a slow circle, holding the phone skyward like some supplicant priestess trying to catch a god's attention. The corn around her didn't move. Not in the wind, not in reaction to her presence. Not at all. Behind her, the house creaked, that high, timber-dry groan of settling boards. Or footsteps. The call dropped before it could even ring. She stared at the blank screen for a moment, then tucked the phone into her pocket and turned back toward the house. She climbed the steps quickly, too quickly, nearly tripping on the top one. The front door was closed. She hadn't closed it. She reached for the knob, grasped it, and turned. Nothing. She tried again, rattling harder now. Locked. Solid. Very funny, she muttered under her breath, knocking twice. Cal. No answer. She knocked again. Calvin, seriously. Let me in. Still nothing. She stepped back, looked up. The second-floor window above the entryway had been dark when she arrived. Now a pale curtain shifted there. Not blowing, just moving, as if pulled slightly aside. Mara narrowed her eyes. Then, finally, the door opened. Cal stood there blinking at her like he'd just woken up. What? Did you lock it? She snapped. What? The door, Cal. No. You just... He looked past her shoulder, as if checking to see who else might have been standing there. You sure you didn't pull it closed too hard? The hinges are weird. She brushed past him into the foyer. I didn't touch it. Cal didn't argue. That was almost worse. They stood there in the entry hall for a few long seconds. The air inside felt different now. Cooler, despite the heat outside. The scent of something faint and powdery lingered. Perfume, maybe, but aged. Like it had soaked into the wood decades ago and risen now only because they stirred the air. I'm going to bed, Mara said flatly, heading toward the guest room at the end of the hall. It's 4 o'clock. Don't care. You don't want dinner? I don't want anything. She didn't see his face as she walked away. Didn't see the way his mouth opened, then closed again. Like he wanted to say something, but couldn't remember the words. Mara pushed open the door to the small room. Inside, a single bed with a sagging frame, a tall, cracked dresser, and a window painted shut. The wallpaper was floral, pale blue roses faded to gray, and peeling in strips above the baseboards. She dropped her bag on the bed and sat beside it, head in hands. Above her, the ceiling creaked. A slow, dragging sound. Fabric across wood. She looked up, squinting. No movement now. She reached for her bag and pulled out her charger. Even though the outlet on the wall had no plate, just wires like black veins reaching inward. She didn't plug it in. Instead, she lay back, arms crossed over her stomach. The light dimmed slowly as the sun dipped behind the hill. Shadows lengthened across the floral print. Her eyes fluttered closed. And then, flash. A burst of white light filled the room, sharp and sudden, like a camera flash. She sat up instantly, heart pounding, room unchanged. But now, in the mirror on the dresser, for just a second, her reflection didn't sit up. It stayed lying down. Then it caught up. She didn't move at first. The mirror across the room showed her sitting upright on the bed, but the delay, that delay, had stitched a new kind of silence into the air. Not just quiet, but observational. Waiting. She stood and crossed to the mirror. Looked at herself. Her reflection looked back. No delay now. She reached out, placed her fingertips on the dusty glass. Cold. Not unusual. But the chill pulsed against her skin like something alive, then faded. "I'm not staying," she said under her breath, as if reminding someone else. One night only. She turned away from the mirror, opened her bag, and began to unpack as methodically as if she were back in a hotel in Chicago. Phone charger useless. Travel toothpaste. One paperback she hadn't cracked open in a year. One legal folder containing the will and the house deed, neither with Loretta's name on them. She laid her things on the dresser in a clean, symmetrical row, then pulled the bedspread back and tested the mattress. It was softer than it looked. No smell, no stains, no rodents. Just worn. Familiar, almost. She sat again and peeled off her boots. Her feet hit the warped floor with a muffled thud. The air held that faint scent again, powdered something, like old lilac soap and attic heat. Outside, the last light of day slipped behind the cornfields. Not that she could see much. The window was stuck half shut behind warped wood, the paint chipped and fused to the sill. She didn't try too hard. She lay back against the pillow, fully clothed, arms crossed. One night, just one night, the floorboard above her groaned. Not creaked. Groaned. Long and slow, as though something heavy had shifted. She sat up again, more slowly this time, listening. Another sound followed, the softest shuffle of fabric across wood, as if a long coat were being dragged from one side of the room to the other. There were no upstairs rooms above hers. She turned toward the door and opened it just enough to glance out. The hallway was dark, quiet. Cal's door remained cracked as he'd left it. She shut her door again, gently this time. Locked it. Laid back down. Tried to breathe normally. The bed sagged a little more than it had earlier, as if the mattress had given up holding itself up. The floral wallpaper fluttered faintly in a current she couldn't feel. Her body sank into the fabric like it was trying to remember her shape. And then, flash. A burst of white light again, instantaneous, sourceless, like a photo had just been taken. She bolted upright. The room was dark. No flashbulb. No lamp. No storm. Just the afterimage burned into her eyes. The shape of her own silhouette, illuminated against the far wall. Like she'd been standing up, even though she hadn't moved.
Chapter 2. Hinges and Scratches.
Mara stood in the parlor with a notebook in one hand and a mechanical pencil in the other. She tapped the eraser against her chin, squinting at the faint gold trim of the mirror over the fireplace. Victorian, she muttered. Late 1800s. Not ornate enough for Eastlake. Mahogany, maybe. Could fetch $300 if the backing isn't warped. You're not selling that, Cal said from the doorway. She didn't look at him. Why not? Because it's part of the house. She scribbled in the notebook. So is the plumbing. Want to keep that too. He walked into the room slowly, barefoot again. She still wasn't used to that, his silence. His ability to appear without sound. When they were younger, she'd always heard him coming. Sneakers slapping, keys jangling, yelling for snacks or change or attention. Now he moved like someone born inside these walls. I'm serious, he said. Every time I try to move something, it ends up back where it was. I took that lamp from the hallway upstairs yesterday. Came back 2 hours later. It was right back on the table. Same angle. Same dust ring. You think the house has a decorator? She muttered, flipping to a fresh page. Is that what you're going with? Cal ignored the jab. It doesn't want to be emptied. She paused, just long enough for him to notice. Then she moved on, stepping toward a set of antique shelves half sunken into the wall. China plates lined them, pale white with fading green patterns. Ivy or rosemary or something equally colonial. She crouched and opened the lower cabinet. Empty. She jotted that down too. You're wasting your time, Cal said. It's not going to let you take anything real. She stood. Is that what it said to you? It doesn't talk, he replied. Not like that. Then how do you know what it wants? Cal's mouth worked for a second, like he was trying out different words before committing to any of them. I feel it, he said at last. The way you feel someone looking at you. Like there's breath on the back of your neck. Or like you've been up for 3 days straight, Mara interrupted. That's what I hear. Cal's expression flickered. Not anger. Something more fragile. Hurt maybe. But it passed quickly. Mara walked past him into the hallway, toward the dining room again. He followed, slower this time, like he wasn't sure if she'd acknowledge him again. She reached the sideboard, opened the top drawer. Inside, a mix of curled silverware, old matchbooks, a brittle deck of playing cards. She pulled out each item, one by one, and laid them neatly on the table. When the drawer was empty, she pushed it closed. Watch, she said. See. No ghosts. No tricks. No. She opened it again. It was full. Identical silverware. Same bent fork. Same deck of cards, now warped open like it had never been moved. She stared at it, jaw clenched, heart skipping a half beat. Cal didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Instead, he walked over and picked up one of the forks. Held it up to the light. Same scratch, he murmured. Right here. Just like before. Mara shut the drawer with force. Cal stepped back, watching her like she might snap. Like she was something delicate, trying not to admit it. Tell me you saw that, he said softly. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her notebook, drew a line through the last 2 entries, and wrote one word beneath them in small, precise letters. Unreliable. The second floor was darker than the first. Not just dimmer, darker. As if the light from the windows below refused to rise past the landing. Cal climbed the stairs barefoot, one slow step at a time, his fingers grazing the splintered banister. Each stair gave off a tired, hollow groan. At the top, the hallway stretched out ahead of him like a throat. Narrow, long, faintly curving left. There were 5 rooms up here, maybe 6. The house shifted under him sometimes. He hadn't counted since the first night, and even then it hadn't felt fixed. The west-facing hallway was quiet. The kind of quiet that hummed in your ears if you held still too long. Cal walked down the carpet runner, his feet brushing over worn fabric with barely a sound. The wallpaper here was green and tan, printed with some old-fashioned vine pattern that had faded to gray in the corners. He stopped halfway down, leaned against the wall. It pulsed. Not much. Just enough to make him draw back, then press again, more deliberately. Like pushing against the chest of someone asleep. He flattened his palm to the wall. Warm. He closed his eyes. That's when he heard it. A whisper. A single breath of voice behind the plaster. Intimate. Not male or female, just close. Cal. He opened his eyes. The wall didn't change. The pulse slowed, then stilled. But he could feel something behind it now. Presence. Something with shape, or want. Not clawing. Not violent. Just watching. He leaned in, bringing his ear to the surface. The whisper returned. Lower this time, nearly inaudible. You stayed. He jerked back, breath sharp. His shoulder hit the opposite wall. A second later, as if responding, something tapped, very softly, on the other side. 2 quick taps. Then a long scrape. Jesus, Cal muttered. He stepped closer again, hesitant, and reached out. With the edge of his thumbnail, he began scratching at the wallpaper, peeling it in a small, vertical strip. The wall beneath was darker. Damp? No, not damp. Oily maybe. Like skin after a fever. He scratched another inch, pressing harder. The whisper stopped. Silence. Too long. Then, screech. A sound from inside the wall. Faint, slow. Mimicking his motion. Something scratching back. Cal stepped away quickly, hands up, palms sweating. He wiped them on his jeans, chest tight. The runner beneath his feet felt thinner, suddenly, like the floor dipped just slightly downward. He turned around. At the far end of the hallway, one of the doors had opened a crack. No breeze. No movement. But something inside it, something just out of view, shifted. Cal didn't move. He stared down the length of the corridor for what felt like minutes. His heart had slowed. He wasn't afraid now, not exactly. Not in the ordinary way. It was more like recognition. Like seeing a face you hadn't expected to remember. The hallway felt longer than it had the night before. Mara moved slowly, notebook still in hand, pencil tucked behind one ear. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just something concrete. Something to measure, to verify, to pin down like a specimen under glass. The second floor had a soft hush to it. Dust softened every surface. She passed the room she'd stayed in, then Cal's. The door ajar, bed unmade, floor cluttered with a stack of mismatched shoes. Beyond that, a narrow corridor stretched deeper than it had any right to. That wasn't there before, she thought. Not like this. At the end of the corridor was a small door, painted the same washed-out gray as the rest, but somehow cleaner. Less chipped. Its knob gleamed faintly in the dim light. She hesitated, fingers just grazing it. Then she opened the door and stepped inside. The room was wrong. Too narrow for one, maybe 6 feet across at most, but it stretched at least 15 feet deep, tapering like a boxcar. The ceiling was too high and slightly slanted. The window on the far wall was covered in sheer fabric that didn't move, even as she entered. The light inside was soft, dusty, amber-tinged. It gave everything a blurred edge, like she was seeing it through old film. There was a single bed along the far wall. Narrow, child-sized. Her eyes locked on it. The bed frame, chipped white paint, carved spindles at the head and foot, was identical to one she remembered from a photograph. Not from a room. A photo. One she'd found years ago, in a box her mother never wanted her to open. A photo of her and Cal, both under the age of 10, sitting on a bed just like this. Smiling awkwardly. Both looking slightly off camera, as if watching someone move just out of frame. She hadn't remembered the bed. Not until now. Now she could remember the weight of the comforter. The itch of the quilted coverlet. The odd floral pattern. Not roses but carnations, their edges too sharp. She stepped toward it slowly. Ran her hand over the faded fabric. Beneath her fingers, the mattress was still indented. As if someone had just risen. Behind her, the door clicked shut. She turned immediately. Tried the knob. Locked. "Cal," she called. No answer. She knocked twice hard. Then pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. She looked at the walls, bare. The corners of the ceiling stretched up too far, like the dimensions had been dragged vertically. Her breath came shorter now, shallower. The air was stale but not old. Like someone had been in here recently, using it. She knocked again. "Calvin, open the door." From the other side came nothing. Then footsteps. Bare, soft. Familiar rhythm. The knob turned. The door opened. Cal stood there, blinking at her. "You okay?" he asked. She brushed past him without answering. The hallway behind him looked normal again. Shorter, brighter, carpet runner straight. She turned back toward the door. It was still open. The room inside was not what it had been. Now it was square and smaller. The bed was gone. So was the window. Just 4 blank walls and a warped wooden floor. "What the hell?" she murmured. Cal didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The basement door moaned on its hinges when Cal yanked it open. "Careful," Mara muttered. "It sounds like it's been holding a grudge." Cal smirked. "Pretty sure the whole house is one big grudge." They descended together, slowly, one creaking step at a time, into the dim, earthy air beneath the house. The staircase led to a small root cellar lined with stone walls and warped wooden shelving. A single pull-chain bulb swayed faintly above their heads, casting shadows that trembled like breath. "It's in the crawl behind the furnace," Cal said, leading her to the back wall. "I wasn't looking for anything. I just heard something ticking, like a watch." The crawl space hatch was already open. Inside, a small wooden crate, its lid half ajar, pushed against a stack of forgotten paint cans. Cal pulled it out and set it at Mara's feet. No lock. Just a strip of fraying cloth tied in a loose bow. He untied it. Opened the box. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. All black and white. All labeled, in tidy cursive pencil, on the white border beneath each image. Mara crouched, hands hovering. Who labeled these? Cal shook his head. No idea. Some of the handwriting looks like Loretta's. Some doesn't. Mara picked up the first photo. A man in a wide-brimmed hat stood beside a fence post. Jasper Blaine, September 1952. Next, a young girl holding a velvet ribbon. Anna Mae Fenley, East Parlor, March 1940. The next, a dining room scene. Empty table, untouched plate, clock behind frozen at 12:12. Unmarked. She paused, then reached for the one beneath it. Her breath caught. 2 children, a girl and a boy, sitting side by side on a narrow bed. Mara recognized her own crooked bangs, her chipped tooth, Cal's terrible bowl cut. She would have guessed they were 6 and 10. They were inside the house. That bed, the same spindled white frame she'd touched less than an hour ago. And the angle of the photo, slightly off-center, tilted like it had been taken quickly, was from the perspective of someone just outside the room. Someone watching them through a narrow gap in the doorframe. Mara turned the photo over. No writing. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. Cal didn't answer. She held the photo out, pointing to the scene. This isn't Cal, I don't remember this. "I do," he said quietly. She looked at him sharply. "I mean, not like that," he added. "Not this photo. But I remember this room. The bed. I remember being told to sit still. I remember a clicking sound. I thought it was a toy." Mara stared at the photo again. The image was faintly warped. Not like damage, like it had been taken through warped glass. One of the corners bore a faint thumbprint. The shadows in the room didn't fall quite right. "I don't remember any of it," she said. Cal didn't speak, but his hand drifted to the side of the box and stopped on a second photo still half buried beneath the others. This one was newer. Color. Faded, but unmistakably modern. It showed the front hallway of the house, and a figure, just barely, behind the banister railing. Face blurred, standing very still, wearing Mara's coat. The guest room had gone cold. Not chilly cold. Enough to make Mara pull her knees up beneath the old quilt, curl slightly, and exhale a faint fog into the dark. She hadn't turned the light on. She didn't want to see the wallpaper again. The blue roses that turned gray in shadow, their edges curling like they were trying to peel away from the house itself. Somewhere downstairs the pipes groaned, or the floorboards shifted, or both. This house moaned like it had secrets stuck in its throat. Mara's eyes adjusted slowly. She could make out the tall dresser across from the bed, its mirror draped in a lace cloth she hadn't placed there. She didn't remember it being there the night before, but her mind was slippery lately. She was exhausted. Fragments didn't fit. She lay still. The sound returned. Soft, steady. The drag of something heavy. Fabric on wood. But this time, not above her. It was in the room. Her breath hitched. She turned her head toward the far wall, eyes open wide now, searching the dark. The sound moved again, closer. Then stopped. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand and clicked it on in one sharp motion. The room blinked into yellowed light. Empty. Except the door was now open. She'd locked it. She was certain. In the doorway stood Cal. Barefoot. Shirtless. His palm was bleeding, a thin, jagged line across his left hand, already streaking down his wrist. He looked pale. Not frightened. Not confused. Just blank. "Did you?" she began, voice dry and unused. "Did you open the door?" He shook his head slowly. "No. Cal, are you?" "I didn't knock." She stared at him. His eyes were glassy. His breathing shallow. His feet were wet, just enough to leave soft, dark prints on the hallway floor behind him. Mara slid out of bed cautiously and approached. "Your hand," she said, gently taking his wrist. "What happened?" "I was trying to write something down," he murmured. "What?" "I don't remember." She touched the wound. Not deep, but clean. Like from glass. What were you writing on?" she asked. His gaze flicked behind her to the mirror. "I think it was that," he said. Mara turned. The lace covering the dresser mirror had fallen off, or been pulled aside. The glass was exposed, and written across its surface, faint and smeared by blood and the oil from his skin, were 4 shaky words. "I never left her."
Chapter 3: The Glove Compartment Bible.
The sky was a pale bleached blue when Mara left the house. She didn't wake Cal. He'd fallen asleep on the hallway floor outside her room, curled like a dog beneath the radiator. She'd covered him with the scratchy throw blanket from the parlor couch and stepped over him without a word. The gravel cracked beneath her boots as she descended the front steps, bag slung over one shoulder, car keys already in hand. The air was sharp with dew and distant manure. Not fresh, just rural. She started the rental car. The dashboard clock blinked 6:47 a.m. Good. Early enough to catch the lawyer's office before it got buried in probate calls and death notices. She pulled away from the house without looking up at it. The cornfields blurred past, still unmoving, stalks leaning slightly inward now, as if listening. The road twisted once, then straightened. She checked her phone. No signal. Again. Mara drove faster. It wasn't until she crossed the old wooden bridge into town that the bars returned. 2. Then 3. She pulled over immediately onto the shoulder and dialed the lawyer's number from memory. Ring. Static. Then silence. She tried again. The phone clicked. Then a garbled sound. Not a ring, not a voice. Something like water boiling behind a pane of glass. She hung up. Called again. This time it rang. Once. Twice. Then the line connected. But the voice on the other end wasn't the receptionist. Mara? Her name. Drawn out. Almost whispered. She stared at the screen. It still showed the law office's number. You came back. She ended the call. Hands clenched tight on the wheel, she opened maps, stabbed at the destination. Blaine and Heskin Law Group, Main Street. The route plotted. For 0.2 miles. Then the GPS flickered. Recalculated. Now 37 miles. Then 12. Then signal lost. The screen went black. The radio turned on by itself. Just static. That same boiling glass sound. She pressed the power button, but the volume increased instead. She yanked the key from the ignition. The silence came down hard. She breathed. In. Out. Grounded herself. This was panic. That's all. When she looked at the dash again, the time now read 8:24 a.m. Her pulse spiked. She stared at it, blinking rapidly. She remembered leaving the house. She remembered driving. But not 97 minutes of it. Not where she'd gone. Not why she'd stopped. And then she was back. The house stood at the top of the hill again. She was parked in the gravel. The engine off. Her seatbelt still fastened. The dashboard read 8:31 a.m. The keys were in the ignition. She didn't remember turning around. Didn't remember coming back. But the house had known she would. The front door creaked open with the same deliberate slowness as before. A sound that was beginning to feel not just mechanical, but thoughtful. As if the house listened for her approach before deciding whether to allow her entry. Mara stepped inside, pausing in the entryway to let her eyes adjust. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No Cal. No footsteps. No thump of the kettle she sometimes heard him boil even when there wasn't any water. Just that warm, old paper stillness, pressed in around the hall like a waiting room without clocks. She closed the door behind her. Cal, she called. Nothing. She set her bag on the foyer bench and listened. There, the faintest thud from above. Then another. Lighter. Almost a shuffle. From the attic. The attic door was shut. She remembered that specifically. Last night she'd pulled it tight and locked the latch from the hallway side, because it gave her the creeps. It hadn't been touched in years, cobwebs clinging thick across its frame. Now the latch hung broken on the floor beneath it. Mara stared up. Another soft footstep echoed above, followed by a long drag, like someone moving their heel through dust. She climbed the staircase slowly, palms brushing the banister as her pulse picked up. The second floor was dim again, as if the light from the morning sun outside couldn't quite get past the window glass. She stopped beneath the attic door. It was open now, wide enough to let the dust fall down in slow, lazy spirals. She reached up, gripped the wooden ladder, and pulled it down. It extended with a reluctant clatter. The air from above was stale, warmer than below. Close, like breathing the inside of someone else's lungs. Mara climbed. At the top, the attic was a single long room, beams exposed, the insulation sagging behind gaps in the slats. Boxes lined the edges, covered in mildewed towels and brittle newspapers. Something scurried in a far corner, mouse or memory. And in the center stood Cal, barefoot, still in the same pants and t-shirt from the day before. Eyes closed. He was facing the far wall, unmoving, arms limp at his sides. Mara froze on the top rung. Cal. No response. She climbed the last step and stepped onto the attic floor. The boards creaked beneath her weight, but Cal didn't stir. She walked slowly toward him, careful not to kick up dust. Her shoes left faint prints in the gray layer that covered the floor like powder. Cal, wake up. Still nothing. She got closer, reached out, and then he spoke, soft, breathless. I remember her now. Mara's hand stopped inches from his shoulder. What? I remember her, he whispered again. I didn't before, but she was in the doorway. His eyes were still closed. Mara stepped in front of him. Who? Loretta. His lids fluttered like in REM sleep. No. He opened his eyes, looked at her, confused, distant, then suddenly afraid. How'd I get up here? Mara just stared at him. You tell me, she said. The attic was locked. You're barefoot. He looked around like the world had spun without him. I was in the kitchen. I remember the humming. Then the hallway, then. He trailed off. Mara looked past him. On the wall behind where he'd been standing, a fresh line of finger-scrawled dust had appeared, a dragging curve, like someone's hand had slid down the plaster. There were 4 prints at the top. Small. Not adult-sized. Not Cal's. The house held its breath when they came back down from the attic. Cal was quiet. Mara didn't ask more questions. She could feel the edges of her rational mind fraying, softening like a damp book spine. She didn't like it. That afternoon, while Cal made what he loosely called lunch, canned soup heated over a chattering sterno flame, Mara stepped outside, claiming she needed something from the car. Really, she just needed the sun. Even filtered through haze and corn dust, it felt clean. Real. She rested her palm flat on the roof of the rental before opening the driver's side door. The air inside the car was stale and hot. A trapped greenhouse. She opened the glove box. She'd stashed a flashlight there, along with the spare insurance card and a bag of wintergreen mints that had melted into one solid cluster. She found the flashlight. And then, tucked beneath the car manual, a soft black leather Bible. She frowned, pulled it out slowly. It wasn't hers. It wasn't the car rental company's either. There was no company-branded insert, no complimentary card or index tab. Just a plain, softback King James. She flipped it open. Inside were layers of marginalia, scribbled notes in pencil and ballpoint, underlined verses, circled words. The handwriting was inconsistent, some sharp and rigid, others slanted and loose. The first page had no name, but beneath Genesis, someone had written, "Do not forget her face. She will be the last to go." Mara flipped further. Pressed flowers crumbled between pages in Leviticus. A photo negative was tucked inside Job, completely black. She held it to the light. No image appeared. Between the Psalms, a newspaper clipping, folded 4 times. A local obituary. No photo. No name. Just the phrase. Beloved grandmother, mother, and custodian of memory. No date. No church mentioned. No cemetery listed. Mara flipped further, more urgently now. In Matthew, a full page of notes in an unfamiliar script ran vertically up the margin. The house listens through the stairs. Rooms that don't belong can still appear. Do not trust the windows after nightfall. Leave the 3rd step uncounted. That last line was underlined, twice. In red ink. The only red ink in the entire book. Mara stared at it. The 3rd step. She tried to picture the staircase in the entryway. Counted in her head. She'd never thought to count them before. Why would she? She snapped the Bible shut. The sun was lower now. The sky darker than it should be at 4:30 in the afternoon. Something was off. Something was folding in around them. She looked up at the house, its top-floor window now partially open, a curtain fluttering gently outward like a beckoning hand. She could swear it hadn't been open earlier. And she could swear the curtain was moving without wind. It was just after dusk when Cal went back up to the attic alone. Mara didn't stop him. He'd been strange since the first time. Not shaken, exactly, but like someone trying to finish a sentence he wasn't allowed to start. Every few hours he would pause in the middle of something and tilt his head like he was waiting for a voice to resume. This time, he brought a broom and a roll of paper towels. Said he was going to clear the corner with the boxes. Mara stayed in the kitchen, watching the stovetop soup bubble in a way she didn't trust. It smelled of rust and thyme, neither of which she'd added. Above her, floorboards whispered and shifted. After a while, she heard nothing. Then a long, hollow thunk. And silence again. She climbed the attic stairs slowly. Her flashlight beam caught dust like snowfall. Cal was kneeling near the far wall, hands covered in soot and mouse droppings. He looked up when she reached the top. His face was pale with excitement. "I found something." He held it out with both hands, reverent. A small, black plastic recorder. 1980s style. Dust clung to the ridges. A cassette was already inside. Mara stared at it. Please tell me that's blank. Only one way to know. He pressed play. At first, static. Then the click of someone hitting record. Silence for 8 seconds. Then a faint shuffle, like fabric brushing a mic. A throat clearing. Nothing. Cal frowned. Old tape, he muttered. Could be worn out. Mara leaned closer. Then, her voice. Who's upstairs with you? Her body went still. The voice was unmistakably hers. But she hadn't said that. Not yet. Not ever. Cal's voice followed, barely audible. She's been here longer than us. Then more static. The sound of wind. A door creaking shut. A second voice, muffled and low, whispered something impossible to make out. Cal paused the tape. He didn't look at Mara. She was already staring at him, mouth half open. I didn't say that, he said quietly. I know. And you didn't either. I know. They looked at the recorder again. It sat on the attic floor like an artifact exhumed from the bones of the house. Something left not to be found, but to be heard when the timing was right. Mara reached out slowly, pressed rewind. As the tape began to whir, the wind outside rose, and the attic door slammed shut behind them. They both jumped. The recorder clicked. Ready to play again. The house never fully darkened. Even with all the lights off, some ambient glow bled in from the windows. Moonlight, maybe, or something else. A low, silvery cast that didn't move with shadows. It coated the banisters, the baseboards, the lip of every frame like frost that hadn't thawed. Mara moved barefoot through the hallway. It was past midnight. Cal had finally fallen asleep, if it could be called that, curled again in the parlor, a pillow over his head like he was hiding from someone instead of resting. She passed the foyer, stopped at the bottom of the stairs. There were 13 steps. She counted again, from memory, then aloud under her breath. 13. She placed her foot on the first one, would warm beneath her heel. No creak. Second step. She hesitated, then stepped over the third, landed on the fourth. The moment her weight shifted, she heard it. A low hum. Not from the stairs, not from the walls. From the house itself. Like it had acknowledged something. A pressure change, not in her ears but in her skin. She froze. A soft click came from the hallway behind her. She turned. Nothing had changed. Except a faint line on the wallpaper. Midway down the hall, just to the right of the old coat rack, was a narrow vertical seam she hadn't noticed before. It ran floor to ceiling, not part of the wall pattern, just barely there. A fracture where none had been. She stepped toward it slowly, ran her fingers along the seam. The wallpaper felt colder there, the air denser, as if behind that wall was more than wood and insulation, as if behind that wall was space. She pressed her palm flat against it. The hum returned, softer now, but unmistakable, like the inside of a throat preparing to speak. Cal stirred from the parlor, a faint groan, but didn't rise. Mara stood frozen in the hallway, her heartbeat slow but heavy, as if waiting for the wall to push back. And then it did, only slightly. A subtle flex beneath her touch. She stepped back, slowly, not in fear, not entirely, more like anticipation.
Chapter 4. Marginalia.
The linen closet door stuck halfway open. Mara yanked harder, and it gave with a wooden shutter, spilling a puff of stale lavender and lint into the hallway. Inside were folded sheets stiff with age, quilted comforters that had long since fossilized into their folds, and a trunk, green, metal-banded, and dented on one corner. It hadn't been visible yesterday. She crouched and brushed aside a pillowcase covering the lid. The latch was rusted but unhooked. No lock. She opened it. The hinges screamed. Inside, blankets, yellowed lace, a small velvet pouch of mothballs. And beneath that, heavy and wrapped in cheesecloth, a thick black book. A Bible. But different from the one she'd found in the glove box. This one was heavier. Leather cover cracked, but intact. Embossed cross barely visible. She lifted it into the hallway light. The smell of it was strange, more than just mildew and paper. Something faintly sweet, resinous, like incense clinging to old hair. She opened the front cover. In the upper right-hand corner, faint but legible, Loretta J. Fenley. Below it, for as in Adam all die, there were notes in the margins on nearly every page. Not printed, handwritten, dozens of different inks. Layers of annotation upon annotation, some overwritten, some scribbled out with thick red lines. Not study notes, these were names. Dates. Arrows between verses. Diagrams of family trees. Mara sat down in the hallway without realizing it, Bible heavy in her lap. A few names jumped out. Gerald Fenley. Anna M. Fenley. Dolores Haskin, not real. Vera L. Fenley, confirmed 1942. Then, Marilyn E. Underlined 3 times. A red X beside it. She blinked. That was her middle name. Marilyn. Her mother's weird compromise between family name and modernity. She'd never liked it. Next to the name. Must not return. Keep separate. Her breath hitched. She flipped faster. Pages rattling under her fingers. Next to Ecclesiastes 1 verse 11. The names come back in new bodies. Be careful what you name your children. Then a boxed off list. Anna, scene 3x, avoid. Gerald, refuses to stay gone. Marilyn, dormant, unconfirmed. Wendell, copied into Jasper? See photo. She stared at the ink. Each name was followed by a different scrawl of notes, like an experiment that had no control group. She turned to the last few pages, many of which had been glued together. One corner had been sliced out with a razor. Then, pressed flat between the last page and the cover board, was a single photograph. Of the house. Before the porch. Before the rot. It looked new. The caption on the back. House number 2 after rebuild. Memory correction in progress. Mara stared at the photo. House number 2. Her fingers curled slowly around the book's spine, gripping it tighter. Something beneath her on the floor shifted. Just slightly. Not movement. A buckling. As if something beneath the boards had just exhaled. The upstairs hallway had always been slightly crooked, subtly uneven in a way that didn't feel like age so much as intent. Cal wasn't even looking for anything. He'd been pacing. That was all. Thinking or trying not to. His hand kept drifting to his left wrist, where the faint smear of last night's cut had dried into a thin line. He passed the bookcase at the end of the hall. The one with 3 warped shelves, filled mostly with Reader's Digest condensed novels and faded encyclopedias. On his third pass, something snagged the cuff of his pants. A corner of the lowest shelf had splintered outward. Barely an inch. He crouched, pushed it. The entire bookcase shifted. Not enough to fall, but enough to squeak. He stood, grabbed the frame, and rocked it back and forth. The bookcase groaned, then toppled with a dull crash, scattering books across the carpet runner. One slid open to a page torn almost entirely out, a single word still legible in the margin. Reversal. Behind where the bookcase had stood was a door. No knob. Just a seam. Paint the same color as the wall. If you didn't know to look, you wouldn't see it. He pushed. It gave way. The room inside was small. No window. Walls lined in red velvet, gone dusty to the point of gray. It smelled immediately of something floral and thick. Too familiar. The kind of scent that didn't come from a bottle, but from an old scarf tucked inside a cedar drawer. A perfume he'd once smelled on his mother's gloves. Or thought he had. The floor was carpeted in deep green, plush but brittle beneath his feet. There was nothing inside but a chair, pale wood with a velvet cushion, and a mirror. The mirror was tall, gold-rimmed, cracked once in the lower right quadrant. Cal stepped toward it, drawn without thought. He stopped a few feet away, and realized he wasn't in it. The mirror reflected the room, the chair, the walls, the dust, but not him. He blinked, moved. Nothing. His breath caught. He reached up, touched his own face. Still there. He leaned closer. Then it happened. A movement. Not his. In the mirror, behind where he should have been, a figure appeared. Slowly, as though stepping from behind something invisible. A woman. Her face wasn't visible. The reflection stopped just above the collarbone. But her dress was pale, cream or faded pink, and patterned faintly with something floral. Her arms hung straight down at her sides. The fabric of her sleeve shifted, a slight sway, like it had brushed against him. Cal didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure in the mirror stood perfectly still, and then tilted her head, slightly, as though listening. Behind him, in the real room, the air changed. Not a breeze, more like an awareness. Like something acknowledging his presence. Like being looked at from the inside out. The mirror fogged. Just a little. As if someone on its side had exhaled. Cal stepped back, and the figure in the mirror took one small step forward. The kitchen table had become Mara's command post. She'd cleared the space down to the wood grain, pushed aside the candle stubs and dusted off plates Cal kept forgetting to rinse, and laid out her materials. The heavy Bible, her notepad, and a pen that still clicked nervously in her hand. Sunlight filtered weakly through the slatted window. The air smelled faintly of mold and something sweet. Not sugar, not rot. Somewhere in between. She opened the Bible again. Back to the names. The ink here was layered, scraped, rewritten. There were entire generations listed in some pages. Overlapping lines of descent, branches that forked into other surnames, often only to be violently crossed out in thick red or blue lines. Anna Fenley. She found the name again and again, often accompanied by small phrases in the margins. Removed 1922. Returned 1936. Not safe when alone. May repeat. In one instance, the name had been erased almost completely. Only a faint indentation remained, like someone had pressed too hard with the pen before giving up. But directly beneath the erased line, written in smaller, darker ink, Marilyn, her own middle name. She stared at it, fingers tight around the pen. There was no date beside it, no additional notes. Just the name, rewritten with deliberate finality. She flipped back to the page near Ecclesiastes. More names, more dates. One entry had a question mark beside it. Eleanor F. With the note, too quiet. May have already been taken. Taken. She circled the name Marilyn on her notepad, then wrote 2 words beside it. Was I named for her? She didn't remember her mother ever mentioning family names. But then again, she hadn't asked. The pages seemed to thin in her hands. Or maybe it was just the passage of time collapsing around her. She flipped through faster, looking for more signs, more context. Something factual. At the very back of the Bible, just inside the back cover, someone had pasted a single scrap of newspaper. A torn line from a local obituary. Survived by no direct descendants and remembered by none. Mara felt her stomach turn slightly. She closed the Bible. The air in the kitchen had gone still. No hum from the fridge. No bird calls outside. Even the flies had vanished. The house was listening again. And this time, it knew what she'd read. Cal carried the mirror down the stairs with both hands. It wasn't heavy, just awkward, and a little too tall to be comfortable. The frame creaked as he shifted his grip. The glass inside rippled subtly, like water under thin ice. It didn't reflect properly in daylight. Nothing in the house did. He propped it up against the parlor wall, beside the fireplace. Angled it toward the center of the room. Then he stepped back and stared. His reflection still didn't appear. The mirror showed the room. The walls. The faded pattern in the rug. The hearth. The base of the stairwell. But not him. He crouched. Exhaled softly against the surface. A soft mist spread across the glass. Uneven, slightly gray, almost greasy. And then, lines. Not cracks. Writing. Looped. Cursive shapes curling into visibility as the fog spread. Only a few words emerged, faint and swirled like breath caught mid-sentence. Brought back again. Calvin knew first. Can't leave until. He reached forward slowly, tracing one word with the edge of a knuckle. The fog didn't smear. The letters didn't fade. He stood and backed away. The mirror didn't change. Then Mara entered the room. She paused in the doorway, expression hard. What is that? The mirror. From upstairs. I can see that. I breathed on it, Cal said. It wrote back. Mara blinked. Stepped forward, wary. Her eyes scanned the surface. There was no fog now. No words. Just her own reflection. Her brow furrowed. Is this a joke? I swear it was just there. She turned to him. And frowned. You're not in it. Cal's breath caught. He turned back to the glass. Mara stood alone in the reflection, framed by the rug and fireplace and the parlor's pale wallpaper. No Cal. She looked beside her in real space. He was there. But not in the mirror. Mara stepped closer to the glass. Her reflection stayed true. Her movements matched, her mouth opened, her breath fogged the glass. Nothing appeared in the mist. Cal exhaled next to her. And this time, just for a second, the outline of a hand appeared on the mirror. But it wasn't either of theirs. It was too small, too thin, like a child's, pressed against the glass from the inside. They spread the artifacts across the parlor floor. The mirror leaned against the wall, shrouded now in a blanket. Cal refused to move it again. Mara said nothing. She focused on sorting, the 2 Bibles, the photographs, her notes, the voice recorder. A system, something solid. But the house was still shifting. I found something else, Cal said, crouching near the hallway's east wall. He reached into the gap where the baseboard had warped away from the plaster and pulled out a rolled piece of paper, tightly folded and banded with a length of old string. He handed it to Mara. The string crumbled when she touched it. She unrolled the page on the floor. A floor plan. Crude. Hand-drawn in pencil. The paper was mottled with water damage, the corners chewed by time. But the main layout was clear. Entry hall, staircase, parlor, kitchen, 4 upstairs bedrooms, attic. And then at the bottom corner, faint and nearly rubbed away, an extra hallway. One that forked off from the upstairs landing. Not in the house as they knew it. Not in the blueprints. Not in memory. Just drawn there. The hallway ended in a small square marked with an X. No door noted. Just a shape. A room. In the lower margin of the paper, written in tight, elegant cursive. Don't forget, this is the second house. The first one didn't take. Memory correction incomplete. Mara swallowed hard. The handwriting matched the notes in Loretta's Bible. What does that mean? Cal asked, eyes scanning the page. Did they rebuild it? Or replace it? Mara said quietly. With what? She didn't answer. She flipped the page over. Nothing on the back. But the faint impression of something bled through the top corner. She held it to the light. Not words, but shapes. Diagrams. Cross-sections? Who builds a second house to hide the first one? Cal asked. Mara looked up at him. No one, she said. Unless the house wasn't just a house. Cal nodded, slow and uncertain. A container. She didn't like the word, but she didn't argue. Outside, the wind picked up for the first time in days. The cornfield bent all at once, like something huge had just moved beneath it. And somewhere deep inside the walls, something clicked, like a door unlatching.
Chapter 5. The House That Watches.
Cal stood in the hallway, barefoot, half-shaven, holding a razor in one hand like he'd forgotten what it was for. There's something in my dreams, he said. Mara didn't look up from the sink. She was brushing her teeth, more out of defiance than hygiene. If she kept up her rituals, she could keep the rest from bleeding in. Cal leaned against the doorframe, razor dangling from his fingers. I think it's been dreaming through me. Like it's using me to remember things it doesn't want to forget. Mara spat. Do you hear yourself? I'm serious. She turned on the tap and rinsed her toothbrush with more force than necessary. You sound like the guy at the train station who thinks the pigeons work for the FBI. I don't think it's malicious, he said. Oh, good, she muttered, wiping her mouth. That's comforting. It's not a haunting, he continued, quietly now, like he was thinking more than explaining. It's familiarity. Like when someone says your name before they know you. Mara finally met his eyes. He looked worn, but lucid. That was worse. There was no mania in his tone, no theatricality. Just the same matter-of-fact calm he used when he was sure of something no one else wanted to believe. I'm not saying it's intelligent, he added, but I think it recognizes us. You said it remembers us. Maybe it does both. She exhaled, slow. I think you need to sleep more. And talk less. Cal gave her a tired smile. I tried sleeping. That's when I dreamed about your hand. She stiffened. What? In the dream. Your right hand was cut. There was blood on the edge of the mirror. You kept wiping it off, but it wouldn't go away. Mara stepped past him without answering. She didn't like the way the bathroom mirror caught light. Always too slow, always too late. Like it showed the room a second behind the rest of the house. She turned to glance at it as she walked out. And stopped. The reflection showed her. From behind. Her own back, her posture, the way her fingers gripped the towel. But her right hand had a bandage on it. Wrapped tight. Blood visible through the gauze. She looked down at her hand. Fine. Unmarked. She stared into the mirror again. The bandage remained. And now the reflected version of herself raised her hand, slowly, and touched the glass. Mara's real hand stayed at her side. She stepped back. The mirror caught up. Now it was accurate again. Behind her, Cal said nothing. But the razor in his hand was dripping. He hadn't cut himself. Not yet. But the house had already seen it. Mara climbed the attic stairs without telling Cal where she was going. The ladder creaked under her weight, slower than it should have, as if each step took more effort than the one before it. She pushed open the hatch and stepped into the dusty hush. The attic was less cluttered now. Cal had moved the boxes, rearranged the crates along the edges, cleared a small path down the middle with a broom that now leaned forgotten in a far corner. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe the mirror again. Maybe nothing. But the attic felt aligned, like a memory waiting to be walked through. Her footsteps sank softly into the dust, leaving a trail that looked older than it was. She wandered toward the back window. The glass was foggy with grime, but sunlight pushed through. Beyond the slope of the roof, the cornfields shimmered. A wind had finally picked up. Not much, just enough to make the tips of the stalks nod in rhythm. Then she saw her, at the edge of the yard, near the tree stump that had once been a swing post. A woman, wearing a faded house dress, gray-blue knee-length, the kind their mother had worn when she wasn't dressed to go anywhere. Laundry clothes, cleaning clothes. The woman stood very still, face shadowed beneath the awning of thinning maple leaves. But something in the posture, the angle of her head, the set of her shoulders, was exactly right. Mara didn't move. Her throat felt thick. "Mom," she whispered, as if the glass might carry sound. The woman didn't react, just kept standing there. Mara blinked. She was gone. Not turned, not walked, just gone. She bolted back down the ladder, ignoring the ache in her knees as she hit the hallway floor. She ran down the stairs, out the front door, into the brightness. The yard was empty. No wind now. No sound. She walked to the edge of the grass where it sloped toward the corn. The dirt there was soft. The rain from days ago hadn't fully dried. And in the mud, a footprint. Left foot. Bare. Larger than hers. Narrow-heeled. Deep enough to show the indent of a callus on the outer edge. Not Cal's. Not hers. Just one. Pointed directly toward the house. The first thunderclap came without warning. No build-up, no distant rumble. Just a single, concussive crack that rattled the window panes and made the overhead light in the parlor flicker violently. Mara looked up from her notes. Cal, seated cross-legged on the floor with the floor plan still spread in front of him, didn't move. "I didn't know there was rain in the forecast," she said. "There wasn't," Cal replied. Another flash, this time brighter. Not white, but a deep violet that lit the room like an old camera bulb. The thunder followed instantly. Too fast. Too loud. They both stood. The lights went out. A moment later, they came back on. Mara crossed quickly to the kitchen, phone in hand, checking for service. Still dead. She picked up the landline receiver and pressed it to her ear. Silence. No dial tone. Another thunderclap. The walls trembled. And then, beneath it, the floor creaked. Not from the storm. From upstairs. "Did you hear that?" Mara asked. Cal nodded. They turned to the staircase. Neither moved toward it. The lights flickered again. Once. Twice. Then held steady. The storm outside intensified, but something about it felt controlled. Not wind tearing at trees or thunder breaking across the sky. It was rhythm. Boom. Creak. Buzz. Boom. Creak. Buzz. The ceiling groaned. The light bulbs dimmed and surged in sync with the footfalls above. "The house is pacing," Cal said softly. They stood there in the parlor, both breathing shallow, waiting for a break in the rhythm. It didn't come. Then the front door rattled. Once. Then again. Mara ran to it, twisted the knob. Nothing. It wouldn't turn. She threw the deadbolt back and forth. Still nothing. "It's locked," she said. "It's not," Cal whispered. "You're just not meant to open it." She turned slowly. The windows now glowed faintly, not from lightning but from within. The corners of the room began to darken, shadows bleeding into the ceiling like ink in water. And somewhere upstairs, above the second-floor landing, something shifted its weight, and listened. When the light stabilized, Mara left Cal downstairs and went searching for the fuse box, or at least the illusion of control. Anything to make the house seem like a normal house again. She stepped into the second-floor hall. The wind had not touched the curtains. They hung motionless, as if laminated into the air. As she passed the old dresser near the linen closet, her eye caught a glint of brass between the drawers. Something tucked beneath the edge. No, behind it. She reached down and pried gently. A leather-bound book slid free. Black cover. Gold corners. Elastic strap. Exactly like the journal she kept in her shoulder bag. Her stomach dropped. She flipped it open. The handwriting was hers. Same tight script, same half-printed E's and long dashes. She skimmed the first page. Then the next. The entries were dated 2 days ahead. She stopped at one that began. "The mirror reflected the wrong room today. I didn't say anything to Cal. I needed him to trust it. But I think he knows. She flipped forward. Found another passage, underlined. If he tries to move it again, stop him. Don't let him touch the mirror again. The more he touches it, the more it remembers. She felt the blood drain from her face. The final page was blank, except for one line, written in the bottom right corner. I already wrote this. The handwriting trailed off mid-stroke. She flipped through the rest, looking for a date, a clue, anything. No address. No initials. Just her own words. Already written. Before she'd written them. Downstairs, the floor groaned again. The rhythm of footsteps. But now slower. Not pacing. Approaching. Mara stood in front of the mirror again. The same one from the velvet-walled room. Now propped in the parlor, half-shrouded in a quilt Cal had tried to tape over the top. The edges peeked out. She stared at her reflection. The room behind her looked the same. The wallpaper. The stairs. But her own face didn't quite fit. There was something subtly off. Not a distortion, not a trick of the glass. Just an unfamiliarity. Like seeing yourself from a dream you hadn't had yet. Cal stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her. It's not a ghost, she said, voice low. No, it's not her. He shook his head. It's the house. They both looked at the mirror. It doesn't haunt, Mara said. It remembers. It stores. No, she said, more certain now. It learns. Cal nodded slowly. The things we've seen, he said. They're not just echoes. They're rehearsals. The house trying to reassemble something it lost. Mara reached out and touched the glass. Cold. Not like ice, like absence. The reflection shifted. The parlor behind her was gone. Now she stood outside, or rather, the reflection did. A girl, maybe 10 years old, stood on the edge of the lawn, facing the house. Shoulders stiff. Hair in a low ponytail. One hand shading her eyes. Staring up. Mara didn't move. The girl didn't blink. Cal leaned forward. Is that? Mara nodded slowly. I think it's me, she said. They watched in silence as the girl in the mirror stood frozen, watching the house as though she'd never left it, or as though she'd never been allowed to. And behind the girl, faintly, almost hidden in the corn, stood the silhouette of someone taller, watching her.
Chapter 6. Under the Boards.
Cal had walked the length of the second-floor hallway 6 times before he noticed it. A different sound, subtle but wrong. On the 7th pass, the 5th step creaked not just upward but inward, like it was breathing through a cracked rib. He paused, bent down, tapped it with his knuckle. Hollow. He knelt and slid his fingers beneath the edge of the board. No nails. Just warped wood and dry dust. He pried gently. It lifted. Not a floorboard but a false panel. Underneath, a square of blackness gaped up at him. He leaned closer. A trapdoor. Flush with the support beams. Rough-hewn. Old. A small iron ring embedded in the center. He hesitated, then pulled. The panel opened with a dry groan, lifting to reveal a crawl space beneath the floor. A warm breath of air rose up. Not fresh, not foul, just used. Laced with dust and something fainter. Cedar? Camphor? He grabbed a flashlight from the hall dresser. The one Mara had tucked there weeks ago, and shone it into the void. The beam caught something. Glass. Rows and rows of it. He slipped his legs inside and lowered himself carefully into the narrow space. It stretched farther than it should have. Too far for the width of the house. The ceiling was low. He had to hunch, crawl with elbows bent. The floor was packed dirt, but someone had covered it in worn linen cloth, like a burial shroud stretched flat. On either side, wooden shelves rose from the floor. Every shelf held jars. Dozens. Hundreds. Each the size of a mason jar, sealed with wax and labeled in faint, neat cursive. Some were dated. Others only bore names. Some had both. He crawled forward, flashlight trembling slightly. The first jar he examined held a thimble, a ring of yellowed lace, and a single penny. Heads up. The label. Eleanor F. November 3rd, 1921. The next, a photograph of a dog, a brass key, and what looked like a child's tooth. W. Fenley, February 19th, 1956. The third jar made him stop. Inside, a scrap of flannel, a tiny screwdriver, and a rusted bottle cap. The label. Calvin Fenley, October 12th, no year. His heart slowed. He reached out, fingertips grazing the glass. It was warm. Not room temperature. Warm, like someone had just held it. Behind him, The floor above creaked. But no one had followed. He turned back toward the shelves. The jars seemed to pulse faintly now, as if waiting to be touched. The crawlspace held its breath. And Cal reached for his own name. Cal's fingers trembled slightly as they closed around the jar with his name. The glass felt denser than it should have, as if whatever it held had weight beyond the physical. He brought it close, squinting at the contents. The flannel scrap, red and black plaid, exactly like the shirt he remembered from 4th grade. The tiny screwdriver, same type he'd used to take apart their old stereo when he was 10, and the bottle cap, a pale green Pib Extra one dented. His hand tightened around it. He hadn't seen that shirt in 20 years. He hadn't thought about that bottle cap since the day their mother screamed at him for scratching the dining table with it. And the screwdriver. He still had a scar on his thumb from slipping and stabbing himself. This wasn't a memory. It was a recording. He held the jar to the light. The wax seal gleamed faintly unbroken. Behind him, the floor above creaked again. Then the sound of knees hitting wood. Mara's voice filtered down, edged with suspicion. "Cal! In here," he said. A moment later, she dropped through the hatch, flashlight in hand. Her eyes scanned the space, the jars, the shelves, the rows. Her breath caught. "What the hell is this?" "I think it's a collection." Mara crouched beside him, brushing dust from her jeans. "Of what?" Cal handed her the jar with his name. She took it slowly. He pointed. "Look at the label." She read it, her lips pressed together. "Where did this come from?" "Under the floorboard," he said. "I think the house hid it." She looked at the other shelves, sweeping her light across them. The jars seemed to recede into the distance, more than the space should have allowed. Like the crawl space was stretching itself, accommodating. She moved along the shelf, reading names. Lucille Haskin. Fenley, unknown. Wendell, archive unclear. Then she stopped. Stared. She reached out slowly and touched a jar. Inside, a snapped crayon. A twist of hair. A glass marble, opaque blue. The label read, Marilyn E. No last name. No date. Just her middle name, written in the same sharp cursive from the Bible annotations. Mara didn't speak. Her fingers hovered over the wax seal, then dropped. She turned to Cal. "We shouldn't be down here," she said. "I know. No, I mean we us. This family. We shouldn't have ever been in this house." Cal nodded. Neither moved. Around them, the air in the crawlspace grew warmer, tighter, more alert. The jars sat silent on their shelves, their contents glowing faintly as if catching breath, waiting to be remembered. They didn't speak much after they climbed out of the crawlspace. The hatch closed too easily behind them. The floorboard slid back into place without effort, as if the house wanted it forgotten, as if it approved of their silence. Later, in the parlor, Cal sat on the couch staring at nothing while Mara turned over her notepad again and again, rewriting the same sentence without finishing it. They remember for the house, or they are the house. Cal hadn't told her everything. Not yet. Not about the voice. It had started as a whisper when he touched the jar. Just a warmth behind the ears, a softness in the gut, like a memory just out of reach. But it grew sharper now, more articulate. A woman's voice. Calm. Measured. "They are not yours to break, Calvin." He hadn't mentioned it because it didn't sound like a ghost. It didn't sound evil. It sounded like home. The jars keep what was lost. What cannot be reabsorbed must be contained. You understand, don't you? You've always been the soft one. He stood and walked to the fireplace, the room shadowed but still. Mara was watching him. "You hear it," she said. He turned. "What? Don't play dumb. I've seen that face before. You're listening to it." Cal hesitated. "It doesn't want to hurt us." "No," she said, standing. "It wants to use us. There's a difference." He glanced toward the floor. "It's not malicious, Mara. I think it's confused. Grieving, maybe." She crossed to her bag, pulled out the jar labeled Marilyn E. She held it in both hands like a hot coal. "I'm burning it." Cal's voice dropped. "Don't. It has me in it. It's not that simple. If it's just an anchor, then let's unmoor it." He stepped between her and the fireplace. "I said don't." She looked at him, hard measured, then turned and left the room. An hour later, when Cal had fallen asleep in the chair, Mara returned. She stood alone at the fireplace, jar in hand, a lighter in the other. Her fingers were shaking. She peeled the wax slowly, pried the lid open. The marble inside clinked against the glass. She dropped it into the hearth. Flames licked upward the moment it touched the logs. There was no scream, no blast, but the fire flared sudden and high, and her hands caught the heat. She stumbled back, teeth clenched, jar forgotten. The flame died instantly. The jar remained intact. Mara woke to pain. Her hands throbbed in a slow, pulsing ache, the kind that made the rest of the body feel like a background hum. She flexed her fingers under the blanket and hissed. The skin across her palms was red and puckered, dotted with clear blisters. She sat up. The fireplace was cold. The jar was gone. She pushed off the blanket and walked, barefoot and stiff, down the hall. The morning light was weak, grayish, unfocused. The walls seemed to lean in closer than they had the day before. She reached the second-floor landing and pulled back the floorboard. The crawlspace hatch waited. She climbed down, hands trembling, and there it was, back in place. The Marilyn E. jar, sitting precisely where it had been, label facing outward. No soot, no heat, no sign it had ever been touched. She stood there, sweating, shivering, unsure if it was the memory or the pain that made her head swim. Then Cal's voice echoed down into the space. "You burned it." She looked up. He was crouched at the edge of the hatch, watching her, unreadable. "I tried." He nodded. Mara crawled out slowly, teeth gritted as her burned hands pressed against the boards. Cal reached down to help her, but she waved him off. Once she was seated on the hallway floor, he sat beside her. "They come back," he said. "Whatever's in those jars, the house brings it back." "I know. I touched mine," he said. "Held it longer than I meant to." Mara didn't look at him. "What happened?" "I saw something." His voice was low now, like a child confessing a lie long after it stopped mattering. "I was in the basement. Not this house, the first one. There was a hallway. Dirt walls. Candles. You were there, but not like now. Younger. You were crying." She turned to him sharply. "I don't remember that." "I don't either," he said. "But I could feel it. Like I was watching someone else wear my skin." They sat in silence. Cal leaned back against the wall. "I think the house doesn't just store memories. I think it grows them. Like roots. And some of them aren't ours." Mara looked down at her hands, red, blistered, raw. "I think it wants us to become one," she said. "Not just part of it." "Of it." Cal nodded slowly. "Like the jars," he murmured. "Sealed and labeled. Easy to shelve." Mara didn't reply. But in the quiet, the floor beneath them creaked, not under weight. Under pressure. As if something just shifted in the dark, waiting to be catalogued next. They returned to the crawlspace together this time. No arguments. No talk of destroying anything. Just two names scratched into silence. The light from Mara's flashlight cast their shadows long across the walls, like paper silhouettes dragged behind them. Cal crawled slowly along the bottom row of the right shelf, counting jars aloud. "Eleanor F.," he said. "Wendell. Jasper. W. Fenley. Dolores. 2 labeled Fenley unknown. Anna M." He stopped. Mara pointed her light over his shoulder. One of the shelves had a gap, maybe 6 inches wide. The linen covering the shelf was undisturbed, except for a clean dust ring. A perfect circle where a jar had once stood, but was no longer there. They stared at it for a long moment. Then Cal leaned closer, gently blowing across the dust. The outline became sharper. Faint residue of a sticker still clung to the edge of the shelf. And beneath the dust, R-O-N-A-L-D. Cal whispered it. "Ronald." Mara sat back slowly, palms against the cool packed earth. "Do we know a Ronald?" "I don't think so." She frowned. But even as she said it, "Don't think so," a tug pulled at the back of her memory. Like a name you've read too many times to remember where you saw it. "What if we're not supposed to remember him?" she said. "What if the house doesn't let us?" Cal stared at the empty space. Or worse, what if it does remember him, and we're the ones who got erased? The air grew heavier. Not warmer. Heavier. Like the pressure had dropped. The jars around them gave off the faintest sound. Not voices, not clinking, just a collective, muted tension. A sense of breath being held. And Mara noticed then, above the empty dust ring, on the shelf's wooden backing, a fingernail scratch. Just one. A single line. Vertical. Like someone tried to hold on as the jar was taken.
Chapter 7. The Third Floor.
The hallway had always been too cold. Even with the vents closed and the windows latched, that one stretch, from the linen closet to the second bedroom, carried a draft like a warning breath. Cal paused mid-step. The breeze tickled the hairs on his arm, curling from the corner where the hallway made a slight jog. He tilted his head. "Mara," he called quietly. She joined him a moment later, rubbing the bandages on her palms, still raw from the night before. "What now? Feel this." He guided her hand to the wall. The wallpaper, faded stripes of blue and taupe, fluttered just enough to betray motion beneath. Mara frowned. "There's no window." "I know." Cal ran his fingers along the wall, tapping softly. The plaster beneath sounded solid, until it didn't. One patch thudded dull. He scratched at the edge of the wallpaper. The corner curled away like old skin. "What are you?" Mara started, but Cal was already peeling. A thin line of shadow appeared. Not a seam in the wall. A gap. The wallpaper concealed a narrow door, barely wider than a pantry panel. Wood grain faded to gray. A small latch, rusted, sat at hip height. Cal looked at her. Mara nodded once. He unlatched it. The door creaked open. Behind it, stairs. Narrow wooden steep, and ascending. The air that spilled down was cooler still, tinged with dust and something older. A hint of lavender, maybe. Or lilac gone stale. Cal aimed his flashlight upward. The stairs stretched beyond the range of the beam. "This shouldn't be here," Mara said. "We're already on the second floor." "Then where does it go?" He stepped onto the first stair. Dust puffed beneath his foot, but not much. Too little, in fact. As if someone had recently walked this path. The flashlight flickered. Mara glanced at the wallpaper hanging in ribbons now, the seam of the hidden door still trembling faintly. "No windows," she murmured. "No sound. No third floor." They looked at each other, and then, slowly, stepped upward into the part of the house they were never meant to find. The stairs should have ended after 12 steps. 14 tops. Instead, Cal counted 37 before the ceiling above them came into view. Each step creaked underfoot, but the sound didn't echo. The air thickened with each landing, growing cooler, drier, like an attic sealed too long. And it was silent. Not just quiet. Silent. No floorboards groaning from below. No shifting of the wind. No tick from the kitchen clock they always forgot to wind. Mara glanced back once. The bottom was gone. Or rather, cloaked. The stairwell behind them dissolved into blackness barely touched by the flashlight's beam. "How tall is this house?" she whispered. Cal didn't answer. At the 39th step, the staircase ended. A short landing opened into a hallway, narrow, unfinished. The walls were exposed beams and insulation. No plaster. No paint. The floorboards were bare, worn smooth in a thin trail down the center. Doors lined either side. 6 on the left. 5 on the right. All closed. All identical. Cal stepped forward, and the floor flexed slightly beneath him. Mara followed, her arms tight to her chest. At the 4th door, Cal paused. A faint scratching sound came from inside. They didn't open it. At the end of the hallway, a final door waited ajar. But just before it, the corridor bent left into a small room. Little more than a nook. Inside, mirrors. Stacked against walls, leaning into corners, nailed at odd heights. Some small as dinner plates, others tall as doorframes. A few were cracked, others cloudy with age. But they all faced inward, angled like spectators in an empty theater. In the center of the room, a display case. Inside, resting in dust and yellow lace, sat a row of antique dolls. Porcelain faces. Painted eyes. Each with a tiny tag tied to its wrist. Mara moved closer and read one aloud. "Eleanor. Anna. Wendell. Ronald." She turned sharply. "Cal." He hadn't followed her in. She found him staring into one of the full-length mirrors in the hall, hands clenched. "What do you see?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "In this one," he said, voice tight, "I'm sleeping. But my reflection isn't." She stepped beside him. The mirror showed the parlor. Their couch. Cal sprawled across it. But the reflection's eyes were open. Staring. Not at the viewer. At her. Mara stepped cautiously between the mirrors, their frames angled just slightly off-kilter, as if they'd been adjusted to catch a particular angle, but no longer remembered which. The first mirror showed her. Or someone shaped like her. Same hair. Same profile. But the version in the mirror wore a pale blue dress Mara had never owned. Her arms were crossed, lips parted as if mid-sentence, but no sound emerged. She stood in the kitchen, the table behind her bare and shining, the windows open to a day that didn't match the storm-laced sky outside. The version of her in the mirror turned slowly and blinked directly at Mara. She stepped back. Cal moved to the next one, tall, with a beveled edge like an old bathroom fixture. It showed the hallway they now stood in. Same bare beams. Same row of doors. Except in the reflection, only Mara stood there. Cal was gone. Mara looked at him. He was real, solid, right beside her. But in the glass, only her breathing fast. Then, in the mirror, the hallway behind her deepened. Shadows spilled outward. And at the end, someone began walking toward her, a long figure, indistinct, moving without sound. Mara reached out instinctively to grab Cal's wrist. The moment her fingers touched him, the mirror cleared, now showing only a smudged, empty hallway again. She didn't let go. "Don't move away from me," she said. He nodded, voice dry. "I wasn't planning to." They turned together to the third mirror, cracked at the base, wide as a wardrobe door. This one showed nothing. No hallway. No reflections. Just space. Dark and vacant and waiting. Cal tilted his head. "I don't think it's a mirror." Mara's hand twitched toward it. It was cooler than the others. The air in front of it felt thinner. Still. Expectant. She leaned in, and the mirror began to fog. Not from her breath, but from within. As if something behind it had just sighed. And then, faintly, a palm pressed to the other side of the glass. It wasn't hers. And it wasn't Cal's. They left the mirror room without speaking. The hallway felt narrower now. The air pressed closer to their skin, as if the walls were considering closing in, but hadn't decided how. The final door waited, barely open. Mara pushed it gently. The room beyond was simple. Unpainted beams. Dust coating every surface. A small iron bed with a yellowing pillow. A desk, cracked along one leg, positioned under a window too fogged to see through. On the desk, an open journal. Mara approached first. She stared at the ink before she spoke. "It's her handwriting," she said. Cal moved beside her. The entry was written in long, looping script, firm and deliberate. Dated July 12th. No year. It read, "Mara, if you are reading this, then I was not able to hide it forever. You must never sleep in this room. The walls remember too much. The bed holds more than dreams. And once it has you, you will forget why you came. If you see Ronald, do not speak to him. He is not who he was. Leave this floor. Do not return." Mara stepped back. Cal scanned the room, then stopped. There. He pointed at the far wall behind the desk. A framed photograph. Dust clung to the glass. He wiped it clean. The image showed a man in his late 30s. Sharp features, clean-shaven. A neutral smile like he'd just finished saying something polite. He wore a dark suit, slightly askew. The photograph was labeled in faded black ink. Ronald, first and last. Mara didn't recognize him. Neither did Cal. But something about the curve of his jaw made her stomach tighten. "I've seen him," she said softly. "Where?" She turned slowly toward the window. "He was in the cornfield," she whispered. "The day I saw Mom. I didn't realize it until now." Cal looked back at the journal. "He's not who he was." Mara nodded once. "We need to leave this floor." But the room had already changed. The air was cooler. The window was darker. And somewhere downstairs, they both felt the front door unlock itself. They left the room without speaking. The hallway behind them felt different now, subtly re-angled, as if the geometry had been rewritten in their absence. Cal reached the stairs first, flashlight shaking slightly. He aimed the beam downward. It didn't reach the bottom. Was it always this long? Mara asked. He didn't answer. They started down. 10 steps. 20. 30. The walls pressed tighter. The air grew thinner like altitude sickness, but wrong inverted. As though pressure wasn't decreasing, but folding inward. At step 42 Mara stopped. Something about the rhythm of the stairs had changed. The wood creaked beneath her, but not in response to her weight. It creaked in anticipation. Cal turned. "What is it?" "There's a door," she said. She pointed to the wall just beside her, where only sloped ceiling had been before. Now a narrow wooden door, smaller than the others, rounded at the top like a dollhouse gate. It hadn't been there when they came up. She reached out. The doorknob was smooth. Cold. She turned it. The door swung open without resistance. Beyond, their kitchen. But not exactly. This kitchen was clean. Uncluttered. No dishes in the sink. No empty cereal boxes on the counter. The light was warm. Too warm. glowing like candlelight but flickering from no visible source. And at the table, Ronald, seated, hands folded neatly on the wood, wearing the same suit from the photograph. He looked up, smiled, like he'd been expecting them all along. "Come in," he said. "You're late." Mara didn't move. Cal grabbed her arm. "Close it." She hesitated. Ronald's smile widened. "You don't want to keep the house waiting." Mara shut the door. It didn't click. It sealed. The sound of something permanent re-engaging. When she looked again, the door was gone. Behind them, the stairs had changed again. Too many steps. Too little air. The house was folding now, reshaping itself around a memory that wasn't theirs.
Chapter 8. The Dead House.
They descended in silence. No conversation, no commentary. The stairs finally returned them to the second floor, but something was off. The wallpaper patterns felt reversed, stripes where there had been florals. And the hallway curved just a little too far to the left. By the time they reached the ground floor, Mara had one certainty. The house had no intention of letting them leave. The first thing she noticed was the kitchen clock. It ticked, audibly. She turned to it, breath caught. The second hand moved steadily, but backward, clicking counterclockwise, smooth and patient. She looked at the wall beside the pantry. The old barometer clock, dead since they arrived, now read 11:11. The hallway mantel clock blinked 12:02. The grandfather clock in the parlor had no hands. None of them matched. None of them moved forward. Mara picked up the landline receiver. A dial tone buzzed softly. She hesitated, then dialed 911. The line clicked. She waited. Then a voice answered. Breathy. Calm. Familiar. "Hello." Mara swallowed. "Yes, hello. We need help." "Who is this?" The voice cut her off. But it wasn't the operator. It was hers. Not her speaking now. Her voice unmistakable. From the other end of the line. "Who's there?" it repeated. Mara's throat tightened. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "I don't remember." The line went dead. She stared at the receiver. Cal stepped into the room, clutching a small clock from the hallway. Its face had no numbers. Just a smooth white circle and 3 hands. All spinning independently in erratic circles. "Nothing measures time anymore," he said. "Just movement." Mara replaced the phone in its cradle. "We're losing sequence." Cal looked at her. "You think the house is breaking?" She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I think it's breaking us." The front door swung open without resistance. Mara and Cal exchanged a glance, but neither celebrated. Outside, the air was colorless. Not overcast, not night, just absent. The cornfield was still. No wind. No sound. The grass at the edge of the porch held no dew. They stepped out, walked 10 feet, 15, then turned back. The house behind them was dark, the windows blank. The roofline sharper than before, slightly off kilter. The gable had an extra window. Cal said nothing. They turned away and headed toward the side yard, circled the house once, cautious, hands brushing the old hedges for grounding. Then they saw it. The back steps. The porch swing. The kitchen light glowing faintly from inside. Cal stepped forward first. Mara followed. The back door opened easily. They stepped inside. And froze. The house around them was unchanged. The layout identical. Same smell. Same hallway. But the kitchen lighter, the one Mara had dropped the day before and searched the whole house for, sat on the table. She walked to it. Lifted it. Still warm. She looked to Cal. "I dropped this an hour ago," she said. "You thought you did," he replied. She turned it in her hand, the old chip on the side unmistakable. "No," she said. "I already dropped it. And now we're back to before I did." They walked into the living room. On the floor sat the voice recorder. Still playing. It whispered looped static. Then Mara's own voice. "Don't let him touch the mirror again. The more he touches it." She stopped it. Cal looked toward the staircase. "What if the house can't hold time anymore? What if it never could?" Mara said. "What if it only remembers moments, and we're stuck living in them, over and over, until we become part of them?" They stood in silence. Then Cal stepped back through the front door. The wind was still absent, but the porch light was already on. It began with a wrong turn. They were trying to find the stairs again. The real ones, the central staircase that curved near the parlor. But the hallway bent too far, and a door appeared where the coat closet should have been. Mara opened it. The smell hit first. Wet rot, mildew, rusted iron, and something sweet and decaying beneath it all. She stepped through. The hallway was the same. And not the same. The wallpaper peeled in curling sheets, sagging with damp. The ceiling sagged in places where rain had bled through. Floorboards split underfoot. A mirror hung sideways from a single nail, its glass cracked down the center like a fault line. The air was cold, but thick, like a room that had been sealed off after something died inside it. Cal followed, flashlight barely cutting the gloom. They found the living room by scent. Old fabric, scorched wood, stale water. But it was wrong again. The fireplace had collapsed. The mirror was shattered across the hearth. The couch was half missing, and in its place sat a folded wool blanket over a foam bedroll. Beside it, 2 rusted cans of baked beans, a pocket knife, and a mold-stained notebook. Cal knelt and opened it. Most of the pages had warped beyond reading, but a few had legible lines scrawled in tight, frantic ink. Still here. Still not mourning. Still not out. I tried the window. I came out the cellar. I came out the front. It all comes back. I saw my mother in the pantry. She died in 1989. The house forgot how to stop. At the bottom of the page, one name was printed in sharp, desperate lines. Jasper Fenley. Mara stepped away, heart pounding. She crossed to the hallway, following the walls as they bowed inward. The floor sloped as if the house were sinking. Water stains bloomed upward like bruises. She reached a door that wasn't supposed to exist. Jagged at the top, warped like something had pushed from the other side. She looked back at Cal. He hadn't moved. Mara, he said quietly, holding the journal. He lived here. After us. Or before us. Or instead of us. She touched the door, and it opened by itself. The room was round. No windows. Just mirrors. Set floor to ceiling, wall to wall. A complete, perfect circumference of glass. Some clean, others webbed with cracks or filmed with mold. And in every one, Mara and Cal. Dead. In one, they were burned, lying on scorched floorboards, skin blackened, lips parted in a silent scream. In another, they floated, bloated, limp, adrift in a bathtub too deep for any house. In the mirror directly across from the door, they were gone. Just 2 empty chairs, one still rocking. Mara stepped forward, hand raised. Her reflection mimicked the gesture, but not at the same time. A delay. Then she saw a new image. Not herself. Herself and Cal, standing in the same room, staring into the mirror, watching themselves. And behind the reflection, another figure entered, soft, slow, silent. A man. Ronald. He approached their reflection, smiling. Mara turned, quickly, breath caught. Nothing behind them. But Cal had dropped to his knees, staring into a mirror where his reflection lay face down in a pool of blood. The jar labeled Calvin Fenley shattered beside his hand. His own voice murmured from the mirror. I told you not to touch it again. Mara reached for him. Cal, she said sharply. We have to go. He didn't answer. His hands were trembling. The mirror shifted again, now showing his face frozen in panic, a hand pressed against the glass from the inside. Mara yanked his arm. Get up. I saw myself, he said quietly. I saw myself after. I was still here. I never got out. She pulled harder. Cal, look at me. That's not the future. That's just a memory waiting to happen. You don't have to give it to them. He blinked. The fog lifted. Together, they turned from the mirrors. The glass behind them remained still, but the faces inside kept watching, waiting for their turn to be real. They didn't speak again until they reached the heart of the dead house. The corridor narrowed until they had to turn sideways, shoulder brushing rotted plaster and beams sagging with wet decay. The smell deepened, mildew, copper, and the sour breath of old breath trapped too long. The final door waited at the end. No handle. Just a warped board nailed like a hatch, warped at the hinges, damp with rot. Mara pressed her hand against it. It opened inward. The room was small. One window boarded. A crumbling altar in the center. More like a table that had surrendered to time. Splintered legs. Wax puddled like ancient tears along the surface. Dozens of burned-out candles stood in cracked holders. At the center, a mirror. Shattered. And on the glass, a word. Scrawled in something that looked dried, flaking, almost black. Ronald. Cal didn't enter at first. He just stood at the threshold. Mara stepped forward, examining the shards. Each one reflected something slightly wrong. Angles skewed, faces incomplete. She touched one and felt her hand ripple. The altar vibrated faintly. Cal stepped beside her. "What is this?" "The house's center," she whispered. "Its altar. Its mirror. I thought the house didn't have a heart." "It doesn't," she said. "But it remembers one." She stared down at the broken mirror, and something clicked. A memory half formed, a sensation more than a thought. "We can't destroy the house," she said. "Not like this." Cal frowned. "Why not?" "Because it's not built of wood. It's built of memory. And memory doesn't burn. It only forgets." He looked around. "Then what do we do?" Mara turned toward the door. "We find the missing jar." Cal's voice lowered. "Ronald's." She nodded. "If we can find it, and take it out of the house, we might break the loop. And if we can't?" Mara looked at the altar one last time, her reflection fractured and flickering in the glass. "Then we become one more thing it remembers."
Chapter 9. The Jar That Wasn't There.
They didn't speak as they pulled up the floorboard. The crawlspace waited beneath, silent and still. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the breath before impact kind. The kind that holds its lungs tight while the memory loads. Mara dropped down first, burned palms steadying on the linen-covered floor. The shelves looked untouched. The jars sat in their rows, glinting, sealed, softly inert. Cal landed beside her, knees aching from the cold. He turned the flashlight toward the familiar shelf. One by one, they scanned the labels. Eleanor, W. Fenley, Wendell, Anna, Marilyn E. But the gap was still there. Ronald's jar, the dust ring where it once had rested, still empty. Still waiting. Cal angled the beam lower. And saw it. A long streak. A drag line through the dust. No footprint, no scuffing. Just the mark of something cylindrical being pulled slowly, deliberately, toward the crawlspace entrance. Mara knelt. "You see it?" Cal nodded. "Yeah." They followed it on hands and knees, the flashlight trailing the line as it curved slightly, rose at the edge, and vanished beneath the second plank of the parlor floor above. They both stopped, looked up. The board above them was cleaner than the rest. No cobwebs, no dust, just a faint ring of wax, like an old seal had melted and run down its underside. "Here," Mara whispered. She reached up and pressed her fingers against the wood. Warm. Still warm. They exchanged a glance. No words. And climbed out of the crawlspace for what they knew would be the last time. The parlor was too still, as though the air had gone still to listen. Mara crossed to the center of the room and knelt, tracing the wood grain of the floor with her fingertips until she found it. The board that felt too smooth, too new. Cal dropped beside her. "Got the crowbar?" she asked. He passed it to her wordlessly. She wedged it under the edge, pressed down slow. The wood creaked, groaned once, then gave way with a soft pop, the nails sliding free like teeth pulled from living gum. The board lifted. Underneath was a shallow cavity, no more than a few inches deep. But the walls were slicked with wax, pooled into thick, red-brown globs in each corner like melted seals. And resting in the center, the jar. Ronald's. It was different from the others. Not sealed. Half covered in wax that looked fresh, wet around the rim. Inside, swirling contents, not objects but movement. Light and shadow twisted together like ink in water, impossible to focus on. Every time Mara tried, her eyes slipped off it. She reached out. Her fingers hovered an inch away. The glass gave off a subtle vibration, like it wasn't holding something still, but something struggling. "Is that it?" Cal whispered. Mara didn't answer. She picked it up carefully, turned it in the light. There was no label. But the shape was right. The drag trail ended here. And the moment she touched it, she felt a strange, prickling heat up her spine. Not pain. Recognition. "It's his," she said softly. "It's unfinished," Cal said. "That's why he's still here." Mara nodded. "Because he didn't let the house seal him." Cal looked at her, voice low. "So what happens if we do?" She didn't reply. But she didn't put the jar down. Either. Mara held the jar in both hands, arms trembling slightly from the strain. The contents still churned. It had no weight, not in the physical sense. But something inside resisted containment, pressing outward as though testing for weakness. She stood slowly. Cal moved to block her path to the fireplace. "We don't know what it'll do," he said. "We do," she replied. "We saw it with mine. With yours. Every jar is a piece. Every memory the house tries to hoard. Cal shook his head. This one's different. It's not finished. If we break it, we're not just destroying a memory. We're erasing a person. Mara's eyes didn't waver. A person who thinks he is the house. That might be all that's holding it together. Exactly. She stepped toward the hearth. Cal grabbed her wrist. The jar jostled. A low hum vibrated through the glass. Mara stared at him. You don't get to be noble now, she said. Not after what we've seen. I'm not, he said. I'm trying to be smart. If he's still tethered here, then he's the house's anchor. Destroy him, and it might break the structure. But it might also set everything loose. No form. No pattern. Just memory without a container. Mara looked down at the jar. The contents pulsed. A shape briefly formed, a face maybe. Or a scream. She exhaled. If we leave it, the house keeps feeding. Keeps trapping. Keeps remembering. Cal didn't speak. She took a step back. Then two. I'm not letting it turn us into another version of him, she said. He hesitated, then lowered his hand. But behind them, something in the shadows shifted. Not subtle. Deliberate. A voice spoke from the corner of the room, smooth as lacquer and cold as still water. I wouldn't do that. They turned. Ronald stepped from the dark. Ronald looked exactly like his photograph. Same too-neat suit. Same calm eyes. But up close, there was something wrong about him. Something in the way he moved, too fluid, like muscles obeying memory rather than flesh. His skin held a sheen, not of sweat, but of waxy preservation. You found it, he said softly. I was wondering when you would. Cal stepped forward. You're not supposed to be here. Ronald smiled. None of us are. But the house remembers. Mara kept the jar behind her back. You're not dead. I was. For a time. He tilted his head. Then I was something else. He walked slowly around the room. The air seemed to follow him, pressing tighter. I tried to leave, he said. The same way you are. 100 times. But memory's not linear. It loops. Rebuilds. Regrows. He stopped in front of the fireplace, looked down at the ashes. You can't burn memory, he said. You can erase it, Mara replied, voice sharp. Ronald turned to her. That's what you think this is? He asked. An erasure? No. This house is me. I shaped it. Maintained it. I took what it gave me and gave it form. Every jar, every door, every mirror mine. Cal stepped between them. You're just a man. Ronald's smile faded. I was. Until I stopped being one. He looked at Mara. Do you know how many families passed through this house? How many left a piece of themselves behind? You think your mother was the first? The last? You trapped them, Mara said. I preserved them. The world forgets. Time forgets. But I don't. The house doesn't. He stepped closer. The jar is mine, and you'll put it back where it belongs. Mara didn't flinch. I will, she said. Then threw the jar to Cal. Ronald lunged, but Mara stepped directly into his path. Stop, she snapped. You want the jar, you talk to me. He froze, not from her words, but from something else. The power shifting. He could feel it. Behind her, Cal dropped to his knees by the hearth, jar in hand. The wax was soft. It peeled like skin. No, Ronald bellowed, pushing forward. Mara shoved him back. His chest was solid, too solid. Not the weight of muscle, but of something old pretending to be flesh. I was the last one to remember, Ronald growled. The house gave me that. It gave you a prison, she hissed. Behind them, a crack. The wax seal broke. The jar hissed, faint and wet, as its contents spilled out across the floor. Not liquid. Not smoke. Memory. It shimmered, dancing like mist caught in heat. Scenes flickered across the walls, flashes of people, moments, voices. Don't go in the field. Loretta, he's watching us again. Calvin, stop taking things apart. Ronald staggered back. His skin blistered. Not from fire, from recollection. His face twitched as each memory passed through him. No, he rasped. Not yet, I'm not, I was. His words broke apart. His features softened, and then fractured, like a wax figure exposed to too much sun. He didn't scream. He forgot. Piece by piece, image by image, Ronald fell away. And the house groaned. Not metaphorically, literally. The walls buckled. A low, cavernous sound rolled from below, like a lung collapsing in on itself. Mara grabbed Cal's arm. Go! They ran. Behind them, the wallpaper curled. Doors vanished. Mirrors shattered not with violence, but disuse. The house wasn't dying. It was forgetting itself. And it would take everything with it unless they got out first.
Chapter 10. The Last Memory.
The stairs were gone. The front hallway led directly into the parlor now, as though the house had redrawn itself to close the distance, to give them fewer choices. Cal grabbed Mara's hand. They sprinted. Behind them, the wallpaper disintegrated mid-air. Not falling but vanishing, patterns erasing from memory before they touched the floor. Doors unlatched, flapped once, then reversed, hinges folding backward into the wall. Mara's breath caught. She stumbled. He yanked her forward. Come on. But she was slowing. Not from pain. From confusion. What was, she started. The name of our dog. Cal looked back at her, baffled. What? Our dog, she repeated, panting. Brown fur, crooked ear. We had him until. She stopped. The thought ended. There was nothing on the other side of it. Cal gripped her tighter. That's the house, he said. It's pulling your threads. I don't. The longer we stay, the more it unravels. They turned the corner into the kitchen. It was half gone, cupboards open into blank space, counters evaporating at the edges. The sink dripped one last drop that hit nothing. Mara wiped her eyes, struggling to stay focused. What was my mother's voice like? She asked. Cal hesitated, then shook his head. We're not answering that here. They pushed through the kitchen door. The wind outside moaned, but not from weather, from breath. The front door stood closed. Solid. Too solid. Mara reached for the knob and paused. Outside, the porch swayed in soft wind, but the trees beyond the cornfield didn't move. The horizon shimmered faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. Colors were slightly wrong. Too warm. Too still. Cal pressed beside her, hand on the latch. Ready, he said. Mara stared at the doorknob. A whisper touched her ear. Soft. Gentle. Baby, you forgot your coat. She froze. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a memory. It was her mother's voice, the exact cadence. Tender. Familiar. Devastating. Cal didn't hear it. He was focused on the latch. I made you soup. It's still warm. You don't have to run. You're tired. Come sit. Mara's hand trembled. She turned her head, and for the briefest moment, saw her mother standing in the parlor doorway. Pale cardigan. Slippers. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The woman lifted a hand in invitation. Cal shoved the door. It didn't open. He hit it again, harder. Help me, he shouted. Mara didn't move. The voice behind her grew stronger. I kept your drawings. They're in the box under the bed. You never got to say goodbye. I never stopped loving you. Cal grabbed Mara's shoulder and spun her to face him. Look at me, he said. That's not her. I know. Then move. They slammed the door together. It burst outward. Light hit them. Not sunlight, not exactly. But air. Real air. And the sound of grass moving. They stumbled onto the porch like shipwrecked survivors washing ashore. The grass was wet beneath their shoes. Wind moved the corn in low waves. A bird chirped once from the hedgerow. The world was back. Real. Solid. Moving. Behind them, the house exhaled. The front door creaked once more, then swung itself slowly shut. The boards realigned. The windows blinked. Open, closed, gone. Paint peeled back into shape. And just like that, it was still. A farmhouse. Quiet. Mara dropped to her knees in the grass, lungs heaving. She clutched the dirt with her fingers, grounding herself in the small pain of living touch. No illusions. No flickering light. Cal stood beside her, silent. Then she saw it, half buried in the grass near the porch step. A glint of glass. She crawled closer, brushed away a few tufts of clover. A jar. Small. Clear. No wax. No label. Just there. She picked it up. Inside, a single pine needle. A torn scrap of lined paper, water-stained. A fingernail. Hers, maybe. Cal crouched. Another one? It wasn't there before. She turned it in her hands. Nothing inside moved. But it didn't feel still. What's in it? Cal asked. She shook her head. I don't know. They sat in the grass, the sun low behind them, shadows stretching toward the tree line. The jar sat between them, unmarked, silent. Cal stared at it, expression unreadable. It could be a trap, he said. Mara didn't answer. He picked it up, turned it in his hand. No wax. No label. Could have been buried here for years. Could have just appeared. It wasn't in the ground, Mara said quietly. The clover was untouched. It was placed there. Cal frowned. By who? She met his eyes. Maybe us. Maybe the house. Maybe both. He held the jar up to the light. The pine needle cast a long, sharp shadow against the glass. He set it down hard. We should destroy it. Mara didn't move. We should, he repeated. But we won't, she said. He sighed. You're just going to carry it around like a curse? Maybe, she said. She reached forward, picked it up, and placed it gently in her satchel. No label means it doesn't belong to anyone, she said. Or maybe it belongs to everyone. Either way, I'm not giving it back. Cal looked toward the house. The windows reflected nothing. You think it's over? No, Mara said. I think it's quiet. They walked down the gravel road without speaking. The cornfield swayed on either side. Not menacing now, just tall and wild. The sky above held the warm gray of late afternoon, as if time had skipped morning entirely. Mara glanced back once. The house was still there, but already fainter. The angles softening, the colors fading. By the time they reached the curve in the road, it looked like memory. The kind you second-guess the moment it's out of sight. Cal touched her shoulder. You okay? She nodded. But the truth was slipperier. She didn't remember what town they were closest to. Couldn't picture the mailbox they'd walked past 100 times. Didn't know which pocket she'd put her phone in, or if she'd even brought it. But she felt the weight of the jar in her bag. That part was real. The shape of it against her hip. The quiet hum that wasn't sound. They kept walking. Birds returned to the trees. Somewhere ahead, the road would turn to pavement. Then into town. Then to something like normal. And when the time came, when someone asked, or when the past tried to return, Mara would reach into her bag and remember the last thing that mattered.
This concludes The House That Watches. Thank you for listening.